The driver kissed his boss's wife and took her heart for a wild ride. A loyal driver's stolen kiss with his billionaire boss's wife sparks a dangerous affair, but soon turns into a twisted game of revenge where hearts, money, and power collide. A driver dares to cross the forbidden line with his boss's glamorous wife. He doesn't just awaken her passion, he awakens a storm of betrayal and revenge. Their secret affair sets the stage for a battle between loyalty and desire, where love is a weapon and revenge is the ultimate prize. This is a story of stolen moments, dangerous love, and a final twist that will leave you breathless. The Forbiddens. Kiss the Night was crisp and clear, with the city lights burning like jewels scattered across the dark canvas of Los Angeles. Ethan Cole leaned against the sleek black limousine, his reflection staring back at him from the polished surface. He was dressed sharply black suit, clean tie, polished shoes, but his role wasn't glamorous. He was the driver, nothing more, inside. The mansion, laughter, and music spilled out from Richard Hale's latest charity gala. Ethan had seen dozens of these events in the 3 years he had worked for the Billionaire. It was always the same. Politicians, business magnates, celebrities, all coming to pay respect to Richard, the man who owned not only buildings and businesses, but people too. Ethan had always thought of himself as invisible in Richard's world. That's what drivers were supposed to be, silent, efficient, unnoticed. But tonight, he wasn't so sure, because tonight, Mrs. Victoria Hall had looked at him differently. Victoria stepped out of the grand entrance with a grace that could silence a room. Tall, elegant, dressed in a flowing emerald gown that caught the light with every movement, she looked like a queen who had lost her smile. Richard was still inside, laughing too loudly, his arm draped around a woman half his age. "Good evening, Mrs. Hawley," Ethan said softly. Opening the door for her, her eyes met his, and for a moment, he swore the world stopped spinning. They were eyes that carried loneliness and fire all at once. "Ethan," she said, her voice low and husky, "please, just drive." He obeyed, slipping into the driver's seat, his hands steady on the wheel, though his heart wasn't. As the car pulled away from the mansion, silence filled the space between them. Not the comfortable kind. This was thick, heavy, charged. Victoria let out a sigh. "He doesn't even hide it anymore," she whispered. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened. He knew better than to comment. He had driven Richard to secret hotels, watched him kiss women in back seats, pretended not to notice. Loyalty in his job meant silence, but tonight, something in her voice tugged at him. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said quietly. She gave a bitter laugh. "Don't be. You're the only one who ever notices." The city blurred past them, neon lights, rushing cars, midnight shadows. Victoria leaned back, her hand brushing the necklace at her throat, a diamond Richard had probably bought to cover another lie. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror and found her eyes locked on his. "You're different." "Ethan," she said suddenly. He cleared his throat. "I'm just doing my job." "No," she said firmly, leaning forward slightly. "You see me, not the dress, not the diamonds, not the trophy wife. Just me." The intensity of her gaze made his chest tighten. He shouldn't feel this way. She was married. She was his employer's wife. But the loneliness in her eyes mirrored his own, and that connection was dangerous. Dodd at a red light, their eyes held in the mirror. The world outside seemed to vanish. His pulse hammered. She leaned forward, her hand brushing his shoulder lightly. "The touch was electric, Ethan," she whispered. He turned his head, and before reason could stop him, their lips met across the seat. It wasn't a polite, hesitant kiss. It was hungry, desperate, filled with years of longing neither had admitted. The kiss lasted only seconds, but when they broke apart, both were breathless. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Ethan's hands trembled slightly on the wheel. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, panic rising. I crossed the line. I shouldn't. Don't you dare apologize. Victoria cut him off, her voice sharp but trembling. Do you know how long I've waited for someone to see me? To touch me like I matter? Her vulnerability cracked something inside him. For years, he had been the man in the shadows, watching others live lives of luxury while he scraped by. Yet in this moment, with her eyes on him, he felt like he was more than just a driver. I'll take you home, he whispered, but she leaned back, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Home? Ethan, don't you understand? I just left hell. Don't take me back there. Not yet. The rest of the drive was silent, but not empty. Their hearts were racing, their bodies tense with unspoken desire. When he finally pulled up to the Holly estate, the mansion loomed like a fortress of secrets. Ethan got out, opened her door, and offered his hand. She took it, her fingers lingering against his palm longer than necessary. Thank you, she said softly, her voice carrying more meaning than two simple words should. Their eyes locked one last time before she disappeared into the house, swallowed by shadows. Ethan stood there, pulse pounding, knowing he had just crossed into dangerous territory. One kiss, that was all it had taken to set a fire neither of them could put out. And deep inside, a voice whispered, nothing would ever be the same again. Dangerous. Attraction, the morning after the gala, Ethan woke restless, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The kiss, her touch, the look in her eyes. He had kissed women before, but nothing had ever shaken him to his core like that moment with Victoria Holly Dodd. It was wrong, so wrong. She was his boss's wife. He was just the driver. If Richard ever found out, Ethan would be ruined. And yet, when his phone buzzed with a message, he knew before opening it who it was from. Drive me today. Just us. Noon. No signature. None was needed. Victoria was waiting at the estate gates. When he arrived, she wasn't dressed in jewels or gowns this time, but in jeans, a white blouse, and sunglasses that did little to hide the exhaustion in her face. Where to, ma'am? Ethan asked, forcing his voice steady. Anywhere but here. She slid into the back seat, her perfume filling the car. Just drive. And he did. Out of Beverly Hills, through winding coastal roads, until the city melted away and the Pacific stretched wide and endless. She finally spoke as the ocean breeze slipped through the cracked window. Richard didn't come home last night, she said quietly. Not that it's unusual. But I watched you drive him to that hotel, Ethan. I know. Ethan's stomach nodded. You shouldn't say anything, I know, she interrupted, a wry smile tugging at her lips. But that silence eats away at me. Everyone pretends. Everyone looks the other way, except you. Her eyes found his in the mirror again. The same electric charge sparked between them. They parked at a secluded overlook where the waves crashed violently. Below, Victoria stepped out, standing against the wind, her hair whipping around her face. Ethan hesitated, then joined her. You ever feel trapped, Ethan? She asked suddenly. He gave a humorless laugh. Every day. This suit, this car, this job. All of it, like I'm invisible, not to me. The words hit him harder than they should have. He turned to face her, the closeness unbearable. She reached up, brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and whispered, You don't belong in the shadows. And then she kissed him. This time there was no hesitation, no guilt pulling them back. Her lips moved against his with a hunger that matched his own. His hand slid to her waist, hers tangled in his hair. The world fell away, leaving only the crash of the waves and the fire between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Victoria. His voice was hoarse, filled with warning and want. If Richard finds out, she pressed a finger to his lips. Let him. For once, I want something that's mine. Not his, mine. That afternoon turned into many more. Secret rendezvous in quiet motels, stolen moments in the backseat of the limousine, whispered confessions under the cover of night. Victoria was no longer the perfect trophy wife when she was with him. She was raw, vulnerable, alive. And even he was no longer invisible. He was a man with fire in his veins, daring to take what the world said he couldn't have. But danger lurked with every kiss. One evening, after dropping Richard at an exclusive nightclub with yet another mistress, Ethan drove Victoria home. She pulled him inside the mansion instead of letting him go. "I don't care if the cameras see," she whispered, pulling him into the darkened library. Her lips crushed his, her body pressed against his, her desperation undeniable. "Victoria, someone couldn't let them," she hissed, biting his lower lip. "He parades his women in front of me. Why should I hide you?" Yet not everyone was blind. The staff began to whisper. A maid lingered a little too long when Ethan left the house. The security guard gave him strange looks when Victoria insisted. Only Ethan drive her, not the others. Even Richard, arrogant as he was, noticed small things: his wife's sudden glow, her growing distance, the subtle spark in Ethan's eyes when she was near. "You're spending a lot of time with my wife," Richard said one night in the car, his tone sharp though his smile was smug. Ethan's pulse raced, but his voice remained calm. "She prefers." "I drive her, sir," Richard chuckled darkly. "Of course she does. You're the loyal type. Quiet, harmless." Harmless the word cut Ethan deeper than he expected. Richard saw him as nothing more than a servant, a man without teeth. If only he knew. That night when Ethan dropped Victoria off, she touched his cheek gently. "He'll never see it coming," she whispered. The affair deepened, not just in passion, but in intimacy. Victoria confessed her loneliness, her years of humiliation, how Richard treated her like property. Ethan confessed his frustration, his wasted potential, his hunger for more than just being the driver. Together, they were no longer weak. They were dangerous, but even as love burned hot between them, another fire began to spark inside Ethan, one that had nothing to do with romance. Revenge. Every insult, every sneer, every time Richard had made him feel small replayed in his mind. With Victoria by his side, he finally saw the possibility of turning the tables, of making Richard Hawley fall, and Ethan was beginning to like the idea. Secrets. Unravel whispers followed Ethan everywhere. It was in the sideways glances of the maids, the hushed conversations of the kitchen staff that fell silent whenever he entered. Even the security guard at the estate gate looked at him longer than necessary, as though he could see the sin written on Ethan's skin. But the most dangerous whisper of all came from within Ethan himself. The whisper that told him he couldn't stop. Victoria had become an addiction. Each kiss left him hungrier, each touch burned deeper. He told himself he could walk away, that he should walk away, but every time she called, he went. He always went, and she always opened the door with that look that said she needed him, not just as a lover, but as the only person keeping her alive. One late afternoon, after Richard left for a business dinner that everyone knew was more than business, Victoria poured 2 glasses of wine and led Ethan into the study. "Do you know why Richard keeps this room locked when he's gone?" she asked, her eyes glinting with mischief and bitterness. Ethan shook his head. "I don't make it my business." "Well, maybe you should." She slid open a drawer and pulled out a file-thick, heavy bound with a black leather strap. She tossed it onto the table, the sound echoing in the silence. Ethan frowned. "What is this?" "Proof," she said, her voice hard, "of the man he really is." He hesitated, then opened the file. Inside were documents, bank transfers, too. Offshore accounts, contracts with forged signatures, photographs of shady meetings in parking lots and private jets. There were receipts for bribes, confidential memos, Even a list of names Ethan recognized, politicians, judges, businessmen. Each page was another nail in Richard Hale's empire. Ethan's throat tightened as he flipped through. This could bury him. Victoria leaned close, her perfume intoxicating, her voice a whisper against his ear. Exactly. And I've been waiting for the right moment, the right person. Someone who hates him enough to finish it. Ethan froze. Her hand rested on his arm, warm and steady. You think I don't see it in you? She asked softly. The way he treats you? The way he talks down to you like you're nothing? You deserve more than this life, Ethan. You deserve to make him pay. Her words ignited something inside him. For years, he had swallowed his pride, endured every insult, every humiliation. But now he held power in his hands, and it tasted like freedom. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The file burned in his mind. He imagined Richard in handcuffs, his smug smile gone, his empire crumbling. He imagined walking away with Victoria, not as her driver, but as her equal. As her partner. The idea consumed him, and yet, with every fantasy, danger loomed larger. Richard was not a man to be trifled with. If he ever suspected, Ethan shuddered to think of what he'd do. The first crack appeared a week later. Richard climbed into the limousine after a late night, his tie loosened, his eyes sharp with suspicion. Ethan could feel the man studying him in the mirror. You've been quiet lately, Richard said, his voice too casual. Everything all right, Cole? Yes, sir, Richard smirked. My wife giving you trouble? She has a way of distracting men. Ethan's stomach twisted. Did he know? Or was this just another cruel game? Richard leaned back, chuckling darkly. Women like her, Ethan, they're beautiful cages. Look, but never touch. That's the rule. Cross it, and you get burned. Ethan forced his face to remain blank, but inside his blood boiled. Richard didn't love her. He didn't even respect her. To him, Victoria was property, no different than the cars, the mansion, the company. And for the first time, Ethan knew with absolute certainty he wanted to take everything from him. The next time he met Victoria, he told her, I want to help. You destroy him. She smiled, slow and wicked, like a queen finally finding her knight. Then we'll do it together. But destruction would not be easy. Richard had power, wealth, allies in high places. They would need to be careful, patient, and merciless. So they plotted. In the quiet corners of the mansion, in secret motels, in whispered phone calls, they built a plan brick by brick. Victoria taught Ethan how Richard moved his money, how he manipulated politicians, how he covered his tracks. Ethan used his position as driver to gather more listening in on calls, photographing meetings, memorizing conversations. Each piece brought them closer. Each secret was a weapon. And with every step, their passion only grew. The thrill of betrayal, mixed with the heat of their bodies, a dangerous cocktail neither could resist. They weren't just lovers anymore. They were conspirators, but danger sharpened too. One evening, as Ethan left the mansion, he found Richard's head of security waiting. By the car, a thick-set man named Burke with eyes like cold steel. Mr. Hawley asked me to keep an eye on things, Burke said, his tone heavy with meaning. Said some people around here might be forgetting their place. Ethan forced a calm smile. I know my place. Burke's gaze lingered. Do you? The warning was clear. Ethan drove away with his heart pounding, the weight of his choices pressing down harder than ever. The affair was no longer just passion. It was war, and war always had casualties. The power shift, the game had changed. Ethan was no longer just Richard Hale's driver. He was a spy, a thief of secrets, a man with the power to topple an empire. Each time he slipped into the driver's seat now, he wasn't just ferrying his boss from one meeting to another. He was collecting ammunition. and Victoria was the one loading the gun. It began with small cracks. One morning, a confidential file disappeared from Richard's briefcase. Weeks later, a recording of his late-night phone call with the senator was leaked to the press. Another time, a key business partner suddenly pulled out of a deal, citing concerns about ethics. Each blow was subtle enough not to trace back to them, but sharp enough to make Richard restless. He's pacing at night, Victoria told Ethan one evening as they lay tangled in silk sheets at a discreet motel outside Malibu. Her head rested against his chest, her voice husky with satisfaction and exhaustion. I've never seen him like this. He's losing control. Ethan brushed his fingers through her hair, smiling in the dark. Good. Let him feel what it's like to be powerless. She tilted her head up, her lips brushing his. You make me believe it's possible that we can actually take everything from him. We will, Ethan promised. His voice was no longer the quiet humility of a driver. It carried steel now and ambition, but ambition came with risk. One night, Richard stumbled into the limousine after another late club run, his face flushed, his tie undone. Ethan could smell the whiskey on him from the front seat. You ever wonder what makes a man powerful, Cole? Richard slurred, leaning forward. It's not money, not women. It's fear. Fear keeps people in line. Fear makes them obey. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Richard chuckled. People like you. You'll never understand. You don't inspire. Fear. You're just a shadow, a nobody. Loyal, harmless Ethan. The word again, harmless. Ethan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Behind him, Richard laughed, unaware that the man he mocked was slowly gutting his empire piece by piece. The more Richard slipped, the bolder Ethan and Victoria became. Ethan followed him to meetings and captured photos of shady handshakes. Envelopes passed under tables. He recorded conversations about deals that would ruin small businesses. Victoria provided access codes, passwords, financial documents. Together, they built a vault of evidence. Every empire falls. Victoria whispered one night, sprawled across Ethan's chest, her nails tracing lazy patterns on his skin. And when his does, we'll be standing on the ashes. But their boldness didn't go unnoticed. Burke, Richard's head of security, began shadowing Ethan more closely. Twice, Ethan caught the man following him after hours. Once, Ethan returned to his apartment to find the lock tampered with. Watching me, Ethan admitted to Victoria. Then let him, she replied, her eyes flashing with defiance. He can't stop what's already set in motion. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. The danger thrilled him almost as much as Victoria's touch, but it was danger all the same. The breaking point came at a gala in downtown Los Angeles. Richard was drunk again, holding court with his cronies, laughing too loudly, bragging too much. Ethan stood near the limousine outside, waiting. Then he saw her. Victoria stepped out onto the balcony above, her eyes searching the crowd until they found his. The corner of her lips lifted in the smallest, most dangerous smile. It was madness to even look at each other like that in public. But Ethan couldn't help it. For the first time, he wasn't ashamed. He wasn't just her driver anymore. He was her partner. Later that night, when Richard collapsed into bed in a drunken stupor, Victoria slipped out onto the patio where Ethan waited in the shadows. The city lights painted her in silver and gold as she pressed herself against him, kissing him hard, urgent, reckless. I don't care who sees anymore, she whispered against his lips. Let the world burn, I want you. And he wanted her just as fiercely. They made love under the stars, hidden only by darkness, their passion raw and consuming. Each touch was rebellion, each kiss another strike against Richard. By the end of summer, Richard's empire was bleeding. News outlets questioned his business practices. A senator he once owned refused his calls. Investors began to whisper, his confidence faltered, and Ethan had never stood taller. "You're changing," Victoria murmured one night, studying him as they lay together. "Into what?" "Into the man you were meant to be." She cupped his face, her eyes burning with conviction. Not his shadow, his rival. The word sent a thrill through him. Rival. Yes, that's what he was now. Not harmless. Not invisible. Richard Hale's rival. But rivals cannot coexist forever. And deep down, Ethan knew the day was coming when Richard would discover the truth. And when that day came, only one of them would walk away with everything. The reckoning. The first blow landed on a Tuesday morning. Richard Hall stormed into the limousine, his jaw clenched, his tie undone. His phone was pressed so hard against his ear that his knuckles turned white. "You listen to me," he snarled at the unseen caller. "If that report leaks, I'll know. I don't care what it takes. Fix it." He ended the call with a violent jab of his thumb. Ethan kept his face blank in the driver's seat, but his chest burned with satisfaction. He knew exactly what report. Richard was talking about the financial leak they had fed to the press. Richard muttered curses under his breath, then leaned back, glaring at Ethan through the mirror. "Drive." Ethan obeyed, silent as ever, but inside he savored the sight of his boss unraveling. The unraveling turned into an explosion 3 nights. Later. Ethan had just pulled the limousine into the estate driveway when Richard's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "Out of the car, Cole." Ethan froze. Slowly, he stepped out, the night air cool against his skin. Richard was already waiting, a glass of whiskey in hand, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "You think I'm a fool?" Richard hissed. "You think I don't see it?" "My wife." Glowing like a teenager again. My driver suddenly walking taller. "You think I don't know?" Ethan's stomach tightened. This was it. Richard stepped closer, his breath hot with alcohol. "You touched her, didn't you? You dared to put your filthy hands on what's mine." Ethan's jaw clenched. He wanted to deny it, to stay safe, but the rage in Richard's voice, the arrogance in his words, snapped something inside him. "She's not yours," Ethan said coldly. The glass in Richard's hand shattered against the pavement. His fist followed, slamming into Ethan's jaw with a brutal crack. Ethan stumbled, but stayed on his feet, tasting blood. "You're nothing," Richard roared. "A servant, a shadow. And I'll bury you so deep, no one will even remember your name." For the first time, Ethan smiled, blood on his lips. "You already lost, Richard. You just don't know it yet." That night, Richard fired him. By morning, every luxury car company in Los Angeles had been told not to hire Ethan Cole. His accounts were frozen. His apartment door marked with eviction papers. Richard's reach was long and merciless, but Ethan wasn't afraid. He and Victoria had planned for this moment. She met him in a quiet cafe outside the city, her sunglasses hiding her bruised eyes. Richard had struck her too. "He knows," she whispered. Ethan took her hand across the table, steady and sure. "Then it's time." Time for the reckoning. That afternoon, the first wave hit. Anonymous emails flooded major news outlets with evidence of Richard's offshore accounts and bribes. Hours later, recordings of his deals with senators appeared online. His voice unmistakable. By nightfall, an arrest warrant had been issued. Richard's face plastered every TV screen in Los Angeles, not as the golden billionaire philanthropist, but as a criminal. Ethan watched it all unfold from Victoria's side. They stood together in her private suite, the glow of the television lighting their faces. She leaned into him, her voice a mixture of awe and vengeance. "It's happening," she whispered. "He's finally falling." Ethan wrapped an arm around her waist, his lips brushing her hair, "and will rise from the ruins." But Richard was not a man who went down quietly. He returned to the estate like a wounded animal, fury in his eyes, barking orders at Burke and the staff. Cameras swarmed the gates, helicopters hovered above, reporters shouted accusations. Inside, he raged, smashing glasses, tearing papers, screaming Victoria's name. And when he finally found her, standing calmly in the living room with Ethan at her side, something in him broke. "You," his voice cracked with rage, "you did this. Both of you. You think you've won?" Victoria stepped forward, her voice cold as steel. "You never had me, Richard. You had a body you owned, a name you wore. But me, my heart, my soul, my love, you never touched those. Ethan did." The words hit harder than any knife. Richard staggered back, his face a mask of disbelief and hate. "I'll kill you," he whispered. His eyes flicked to Ethan. "Both of you?" Burke moved forward, but Ethan stepped into his path. For once, the driver did not bow. "Not today," Ethan said, his voice calm, steady. Final dot, and for the first time, Richard saw it. The man who had once been a shadow now stood taller than him. The power had shifted. Hours later, Richard Hawley was dragged out of his mansion in handcuffs, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. His empire was crumbling, his allies abandoning him, his wealth frozen by investigators, and Ethan stood at the window beside Victoria, watching his former master reduced to nothing more than a headline. The reckoning was complete, but as Richard was shoved into the back of a police car, his eyes locked on Ethan's one last time dot, and in those eyes burned a promise. This wasn't over. Love and revenge. The Hawley mansion was quiet. For the first time in years, no footsteps echoed in the marble halls, no servants rushed to appease their master, no car engines roared in the driveway. Richard Hall was gone, dragged away in handcuffs, his empire dismantled overnight, his name whispered like a curse in every business circle. Politicians severed ties, stockholders filed lawsuits, and the mansion he once flaunted as his throne now stood as a hollow monument to arrogance. Victoria walked through the silence with bare feet, her hand brushing along the cold banister. Every corner of the house still reeked of him, of the years she had spent locked in a gilded cage. But tonight she wasn't alone. Ethan followed her, his presence steady, grounding her. "You're free now," he said softly. She stopped at the window, overlooking the city, the lights sparkling like a million tiny secrets. "Free," she repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. And for the first time, it felt true. The media storm was relentless. Cameras camped outside. Tabloids screamed headlines. "Billionaire arrested in corruption scandal." The fall of Richard Hall, wife and driver at the center of the storm. Every whisper about Victoria and Ethan now painted them as conspirators, lovers who had toppled a giant. Some called her a victim, others a betrayer. Some praised Ethan as a hero, others condemned him as an opportunist, but none of it mattered. Not anymore. Victoria sat at the edge of her bed, her hand clasped in Ethan's. "They can say what they want. For once I don't care." Ethan smiled faintly. "You shouldn't. They never lived your life. They don't know the cages you've walked in." She leaned into him, her lips brushing his. "And you? Do you regret it?" The shadows, the lies, the risk. His eyes burned with quiet fire. "I regret every moment I waited to touch you. Everything else was worth it." But shadows linger even after freedom. Weeks passed. Richard's trial loomed. The prosecutors built their case brick by brick, using the files Ethan and Victoria had given them. Richard's lawyers clawed for every loophole, but the evidence was damning. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the memory of Richard's last look, the promise of vengeance in those furious eyes. One evening, as Ethan locked the estate's gates, Burke appeared from the darkness. The loyal bodyguard who had once followed Richard's every command now stood uncertain, his broad shoulders heavy. "He'll never forgive you," Burke warned quietly. "Even from prison, men like him don't die easily." Ethan didn't flinch. "Then let him come. I've been in his shadow long enough. If he wants war, he'll find I'm not the servant he remembers." Burke studied him for a long moment, then nodded once and disappeared into the night. The trial began. Cameras swarmed the courthouse. Richard Hall entered in shackles, but his eyes were still sharp, still burning. When his gaze found Victoria in the gallery, his lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. Testimonies unraveled him piece by piece. Business partners betrayed him to save themselves. Secretaries confessed to crimes they'd covered up. And Ethan's recordings played for the court Richard's own voice, damning him. Yet when Victoria took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She spoke not as a wife, but as a prisoner of years. She told them of bruises hidden under silk gowns, of nights where silence was her only shield, of a life where wealth was just another chain. When she finished, there wasn't a sound in the room. Richard slammed his fists on the table, roaring that she was a liar, a traitor, a whore. The judge silenced him, but his venom filled the air, and in that moment, everyone saw the truth, not the polished billionaire, but the monster beneath. The verdict came swift. Guilty. Richard Holloway was sentenced to decades behind bars. His fortune seized, his empire dismantled, his legacy reduced to ash, but as guards dragged him away, his eyes locked on Victoria once more. His voice, low and deadly, carried across the courtroom. "This isn't over." The storm ended at last. In the weeks that followed, the cameras left, the world moved on, and the Holloway mansion was sold to strangers. Victoria and Ethan vanished. From the headlines, choosing anonymity over spectacle, they found a cottage by the sea, far from the city's poison. The air was clean, the nights quiet, the days filled with nothing but each other. One evening, Victoria stood barefoot on the shore, her dress fluttering in the wind. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "After everything," she whispered, "do you ever wonder if it was revenge that bound us and not love?" Ethan kissed her temple, his voice steady. "Revenge lit the fire, but love kept it burning. I'd choose you again, even without the war." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Then let's never look back." And under the fading sun, they kissed, their shadows stretching across the sand like two survivors who had finally claimed their freedom. But deep in a prison cell, Richard Holloway sat in silence. A single photo of Victoria and Ethan taken by a tabloid lay in his hands. His lips curled into a smile that was not defeat, but promise. One day, somehow, the reckoning would return, and when it did, it would be his.